Welcome to the first ever Scout podcast, where we're on a mission to equip athletes with the knowledge and tools to maximize their financial journey. I'm Mike Haddix. I'm the founder and CEO of Scout. I play college basketball at Siena, went to Columbia Business School. My dad was a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. So I've lived through the ups and downs of playing athletics, but also seeing the finance and the impact that it has. So we have Steve here, who I grew up with, Division I coach for 13 years, coached at DePaul, Richmond, Oregon, Virginia Tech, and he works here at Scout, kind of helping us navigate these journeys, not just for the athletes, but for the coaching staffs and for the admins as well. But a packed episode for you today and a very special guest of the pod. It's our first guest. And here's the rundown of the topics for today. We're going to go through the biggest headlines in NIL, including why Syracuse football coach Fran Brown is making his players save 40% of their paychecks. We have our office hour session where we answer real questions from our audience about an athlete's financial journey. And finally, we'll be joined by 11-year NBA veteran Charlie Villanueva for a conversation about his financial journey as a pro athlete. So subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on Instagram at Invest with Scout. We also have a weekly newsletter to keep you updated on what we're seeing on the front lines of this college sports financial revolution.
All right, Mike, let's get into what's happening in the news here, NIL headlines. All right, we'll start with the big case on Monday. Judge Wilkins reviewing the House settlement, came back, didn't sign it. It looks like it's trending in the right direction. She had some hiccups on the way that she wanted to address. Just walk us through what you've heard, whether it's the roster limits, whether it's the Clearinghouse stuff or the Deloitte, just some of the things we're hearing out there with Judge Wilkins when she came back.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. I think everybody was sort of waiting on Monday to be like, let's start moving forward. We talked to a lot of college athletics programs. I think the idea was on Monday, once everything's signed off on, everything can sort of proceed quickly. But in the legal world, this never happens. But there's a few things to talk about. I think kind of roster limits are one of them, right? So the idea there is when you're limiting the size of a roster, I think it makes it tough across the board, right? Because I think what people overlook is some of the smaller schools, those roster limits are tuition dollars, right? So a lot of enrollment that drives a lot of these smaller schools to survive is based on the fact that you don't have all full scholarship athletes. So if you think about a soccer team or a baseball or a lacrosse team where, 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6 of those roster spots are full, paid tuition. So those are, these enrollment seats that colleges really value. So the roster limit sort of shakes that up a little bit. And I think thinking through practice players, walk-ons, that's an experience from a college standpoint that's really valuable to a school, to their alumni base, to their fundraising, to all these other pieces. So I think making sure that is thought out and doesn't hurt kind of the other benefits of college is an important piece. And then there's a really controversial piece of this Deloitte Clearinghouse. So for those that don't know, so what's happening is, we've talked about, NIL for a long time. And now that it's sort of established, I think it's evolved, right? A lot of it is, this concept of pay for play, right? So how do we make sure that if you're getting an NIL deal, it's true NIL? So I'm not just paying you $500,000 to sign some autographs, right? And, sort of it happens. It is what it is, right? Ain't my place to make bad judgment on that. But I think the idea there is how do you make sure these are true NIL deals? So Deloitte's establishing a clearinghouse. And what that means is if you sign a deal, it has to be submitted to Deloitte. They have to go through this process where they approve it and say if it's true NIL or not, right? If it's true NIL, it's approved. If it's not, they may come back and say that deal is only worth $30,000, not $60,000. You can sort of appeal it. You can think there's a process there involved, but I think that's a tough one, right? Because I think the value of anything is what someone's willing to pay for it. So to assess how much somebody's true NIL value, it's all in the eyes of the beholder. I look at it like art, right? So somebody might say that painting's worth $5, or somebody might say that painting's worth $1 million, right? So if I'm selling it for $1 million and you come and tell me I can only sell for $5, right? That's like sort of anti-capitalism, right? Everything this country's sort of built on. So I think that'll be a place where a lot of kinks need to be worked out, and that's a hot topic, right? Because if you think about a lot of these schools that boosters have a lot of money, they might have a local car dealership, or they want to have their favorite athlete on a commercial. And that may just be, the walk-on, or might be the third string quarterback, right? And if somebody comes in and says, that is not true NIL, deal, now you start to say kind of who are they to say this, right? So I think kind of that's a big piece of it. So I think
too, Mike, I think the timing of it too is how quick these deals can be done, confirmed, vetted in the clearinghouse. I mean, an example would be just now with Florida in the national championship game in the Final Four, and these guys that are getting quick turnaround offers, and timing is of the essence. They're a hot topic. It might be for 3-4 days whether it's online, viral, this local business that wants to maximize this opportunity to get these guys out and pay them these marketing dollars. And, they got to say, hold on, we have to get it cleared through the clearinghouse. The NCAA tournament's a perfect example of that. You don't know who's going to be the Cinderella in the Sweet 16, and there's potential marketing dollars out there for these kids. And to say, well, wait, we have to get it cleared by Deloitte, I think it's a real slowdown. And I've seen some articles where people from Florida said you wouldn't believe the amount of requests we're getting for our guys. So I do think that's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, right? Because I think about like time, right? You mentioned the idea time is of the essence in anything, right? You look at Hollywood, right? Somebody's a hot commodity for a few, and then for a few months or a few years, and then it's over, right? So there's always a window to this. So my fear is, say while you're waiting for your clearinghouse deal to close or to get approved, right? And it takes a while, or you go through appeal and you're sort of waiting and you miss out on other opportunities, right? And then they say, hey, we thought that was, you were at close to 80 grand. No, we were saying it's worth 10, but you have 4 deals on the table that have now gone away because those companies have had to go find someone else. So I think you're going to see, our goal at Scout is always about like, this is the players, right? How do we protect the players and maximize their future opportunities? So I think the fear is, anything that goes through sort of this bureaucracy takes time, but sometimes these kids don't have it, right? And they have one opportunity in one window to maximize kind of what's going on. You mentioned, right? So if you play on the NCAA tournament on a Thursday, right, and you have a great game and your team wins, it's, you upset a number one seed, right? You play again on a Saturday. So, and that's 48 hours. So if all of a sudden you have all these deals and they go through the clearinghouse and you're waiting and you play terrible and shoot 0 for 16 on Saturday and now those deals go away, like what happens? I mean, I know lawyers will get involved, but I think that's some things to think about.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So with the hearing and the House settlement not being signed, I mean, next steps here, what do you think? What are ADs thinking? What do you think? All these admins and athletic departments, where do we go? Because everybody's been in this holding pattern.
Yeah, I think right now, I think there's an assumption that it's going to go through. There'll be some changes that happen, but nothing monumental. So like the bones are there. So I think what we've seen is we've started to see a hyperdrive, right? We start to see athletic directors, deputy ADs, coaches, everybody's got to move because guess what? The first football game is still going to be in August, right? The portal, is open, right? Or it's opening. So all these things that are starting to happen aren't waiting on the fact that we're waiting on sign-up. So you better be planning for how you're going to distribute that money, how you're going to recruit those players, how you're going to take care of the money for the play. Like all these things you better be planning for because that time, the football season is coming, whether we have an approval process or not, right? So I think what we're starting to see now is I think it started off in December-ish is let's wait a little bit, let's take some time, things will be ironed out by then. And now it's becoming, man, it's still getting kicked down the road a little bit, but we have to operate under the assumption. We have to operate under the assumption that it's going to happen. Because if we don't and somebody else is, they're going to have a leg up on us. And if they have a leg up on us, then it's all about winning games, right? And nobody cares that you decided to wait until every single T was crossed and I was dotted to sort of think about strategy. Because if you go, 0-15 or you go 0-32, right, like you don't have a job anymore. So I think we're starting to see, ADs and people in admin and administration start to think about like, how do we strategize and plan and get the pieces in place so that when that day does come, we don't have to go through this whole formal process because, things are slow a lot of times in college athletics.
Yeah, you're right. So keeping it close to the financial stuff, Mike, and we're talking about rev share, all these other things that are happening, and a little close to our hometown where we grew up. Coach Fran Brown at Syracuse, a Camden native, South Jersey guy, is came out and he's really, pounded his fist on the table about how having his guys equipped both with financial literacy and making sure that not only do they make money from playing football at Syracuse, but they keep money. He's come out and said 40% of their checks are going to be put away in a savings account and those type of things. Give us like a little deeper dive. And I know you've talked to Coach and you've kind of gotten his mindset on which direction he's going with that. But take us into where a coach at a high level is being super proactive with this type of stuff.
Yeah, I think I'm surprised this hasn't been a topic of conversation publicly more, right? We have a lot of great coaches we work with, and what we've seen is it is happening behind closed doors. I think every single coach now, especially with football and some of the money getting up there in basketball as well, I think every single coach is thinking about this. So I'm surprised that he's the first to come out and say it, because I think let's sort of step back, right? When collectives were paying the money directly to the players, right? There's a level of separation, right? So it's like, I'm the coach here. I'm not involved in a collective. That's a separate entity. Like, if they don't give you your tax forms, if they don't make sure your taxes are good, like, I can only do so much, right? There was a level of separation there. I think in July 1st, right, when rev share is coming from the school directly, now that liability is falling on coaches and school administration. So now I think this is becoming even more real. But I think, as I mentioned, I'm surprised that we haven't talked about this publicly more, because this players getting paid as 1099s. Nobody's taking taxes out. If you look at me or you or anybody at 18 or 19 years old, right? Imagine giving yourself at 19 100 grand on April 16th and saying, do me a favor, 364 days from now, have half of that in your pocket. It wouldn't happen. So I think a lot, players and coaches and admin need to be protecting their players from this piece of, like, protect them from themselves. Same way that, like, you're not going to throw a player out in the field without coaching them up, right? Getting them ready, making sure they're as prepared as possible to be as successful as they can be, right? Optimize it, right? So whether they're making 100 grand, $1 million, or 10 grand, like, optimize that situation that you're in. So for him,
here's a question for you. What do you say to a coach that says, "I've already given. They wanted the money. I given them the money. It's on them. It's not my. I'm not responsible for this." Or the AD that's, or the deputy AD that doesn't want to hear about it, or is a little reluctant to be like, I don't want to get involved in their finances. What do you say to them?
Yeah, I think the first thing is, one, you're paying them, right? So it's coming from you, right? So, like, you're paying them. I know these players aren't employees. Every single company, right, in the world is putting something in place. Like, they have 401ks, right? They have benefit plans, right? They're doing a lot of these things to make sure that they are putting their employees or people that work for them in the best position to be successful. The second thing I'd say is, this isn't 30-year-old, grown folks who have gone through a lot of kind of ups and downs in life and seen a lot when it comes to working in the finance world. So I'd always ask, like, is this what you tell them in front of their mom when you're recruiting them? When you have them and you're sitting at that kitchen table with mom and grandma, and you're telling them all these things about why sports isn't the only thing I care about, and developing this person to make sure they're better when they leave school, and putting them in a position to be successful, and showing you the science building, and showing you, the tradition and the alumni base. You're showing them all this stuff to show them that I care about you outside of just what you do on the field or on the court. This is one of those things. So I think, to those coaches that are saying that, I think, I get it, right? Like, you're not paid. I always say this, right? Like, we're realists, right? If your whole team has a 4-0 and you don't win any games, you're getting fired. So we get that piece of it. But I also think we have a duty to these young players to make sure that they don't hamstring themselves by leaving school in debt or get in trouble. We had an AD we talked to a couple months ago, and I was like, what does success look like for you at the end of this first year rev share? And he said, my biggest thing is, how do I make sure these players are okay on this journey? What he means is, like, a lot of these college towns that you're in, right? Like, they may be some blue collar towns, and you now have kids making $400,000, $500,000, $600,000. Everybody knows who they are. People taking advantage of them. Are they getting in trouble? Are people trying to extort them? Are people like trying to prey on them? Just all these things. He wanted to protect them. I think, this isn't pro sports, right? It's a little different. It's college athletics. All these kids aren't going pro. They have a long life ahead of them. So to those coaches, I would always say, like, we all agree that helping players off the court or off the field ends up making a better player. And you better believe that if you want to recruit and retain and make sure players in this era are staying, you got to be doing more than just, coaching them up on the court of the field. So that's my opinion. But also, everybody doesn't believe it. And I'd say, like, listen, in the world, like, this isn't for everybody, right? But I think what we'll start to see is the coaches and the staffs that invest in this mindset will rise to the top. Because at some point, like, money's money, right? It's like, it's going to even out at the higher level a little bit. So it's like, what else are you doing? It's like, everybody had a great locker room. It's like, what else are you doing, right? Everybody has great facilities. Or what else are you doing? So what else are you doing?
Speaking about basketball and the coaches, down at the Final Four last week, we had a chance to interact with a lot of coaches and ADs. Top of mind, obviously, the transfer portal. Everybody is frustrated and all over the place trying to navigate it. What are some of the conversations, whether it's an AD or a coach, anything that's come up that said like, "Hey, this is what keeps me up at night," or this is something that you guys can help us with, or how
Yeah.
can we navigate this so-called wild west that we're in, and everybody likes to slap around like in college athletics right now?
Yeah, I think money makes people do funny and interesting things, right? So a lot of coaches will we talk through some strategy. We think about this idea of like we know when players make a bad money decision, right? What happens is right. So say all of a sudden I make 300 grand at the school, and I haven't planned for my taxes, and now it's tax day, and I don't have 150 grand. I'm going to coach. Hey, coach, can I get 150 grand? But we paid X, Y, and Z, and then what happens is that school down the street goes, we got you. I got you this 150 grand if you come here, right? So I think we're seeing a lot of this, like how do we protect and prepare the players to also help them retain and stay at the school they're at, make better financial decisions, right? Keep them sort of happy being here, help them make better decisions, whether it's leaving early for the draft, like if it's not the right time. But I think, this money being a conversation in every portal sort of conversation, we need to make sure we have a tool to show that we're thinking about that piece as well. That's been a big piece of it. It's like it's exploded and become numbers are astronomical, and it's probably we never thought they would get this high. But I also think you can't go into all the coaches like they say this. You cannot go into a conversation ill-equipped to have a money conversation. You cannot. You can't walk into a room with mom, grandma, maybe agent now, family members. You cannot walk in that room and say, I'm not going to talk about the money thing. We'll be fine. Like you can't. You have to be prepared and be ready when they ask you, hey, should my son have an LLC? What do you think? Can the school pay through an LLC? Right. Those are some of the things that are coming up. Hey, what happens? You helping them with taxes? Do they understand that? Are they getting a write off? Right. If they're getting a car and their NIL deal, right? Is that on their 1099? Like you better be equipped to have those conversations because if you aren't, somebody else will, and that better be that's a big piece of how you're winning over the overall experience of coming to your school versus going somewhere else.
All right, so moving forward, that's kind of what's in the news. With the way that the world works, there'll be 10 more topics we can talk about in the next 24 hours. Let's go to some questions from some emails. I want to fire at you. Just some people that have reached out. They got some questions, and I want to see how you respond to them and see if you can help them out. Sound good?
Yeah, perfect. Works for me.
I'm a high school senior committed to a Power 5 school for football. Everyone's telling me I need an LLC since I'm making some NIL money. What's the point of an LLC, and why do I need to set one up?
Yeah, that's a good question. So this is like we have a couple schools that we'll be at, so a couple Power 4 schools, and these are conversations that college kids are asking or their parents are asking, right? Even when their kids are senior high school, so or senior college, excuse me. So yeah, so from an LLC standpoint, right? When you're paid NIL, it is as a 1099. So Steve, we talk about this analogy a lot, right? If somebody pays you to paint a house, right? They are saying, here's $500, paint the house. And then, you got to figure everything out. Go get your paint, go get your supplies. I'm not paying for that stuff, right? So of that 500 you make, you got to pay for your supplies and all these other things, these expenses, right? You're paid the same way when you're playing college athletics for NIL. So you're paid as a business. So an LLC sort of creates that business, right? So you get paid, you can get that money in your account. You still have a little bit of flexibility there because you're paid as a contractor. But if you set the LLC up, it gives you a little bit more flexibility, right? It protects you for one piece. That's a big piece of it, right? Because if you're paid to do 4 appearances and you show up for 3, guess what's going to happen? That local, restaurant that got upset with you for not showing up is going to sue you. Because they marketed it and they advertised you to show up and they sold tickets and you didn't come there, and they lost on revenue and their reputation is a little off, they are going to sue you. So the LLC sort of protects you and kind of keeps that stuff in a box. And the other piece is it gives you a lot of flexibility when you get to some of the tax write-offs, right? Do you have a car that you're driving back and forth, right? Do you have a second bedroom in your apartment that you're using as an office, right? Gas to and from appearances. There's a lot of things that you can do as a business and a business structure that is protecting you, helping you alleviate some of those taxes, and then thinking through unique strategies to use this opportunity to kind of create wealth and protect yourself from just a lot of the other nuances from a tax standpoint that you have to pay when you take a check. So an LLC is going to protect you, give you some flexibility when it comes to a tax standpoint. So my answer is, my long way of saying a short answer is yes. And that's something that we talk to all of our athletes about, right? We help them set one up. We'll walk into and we'll set up 100 LLCs for players, right? The goal there is put the structure around yourself to be able to benefit long term.
So you think every player should have one that's receiving NIL in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah, I think 99% of them, right? If you're making a little bit of money and it's a small couple $100, maybe it's not necessary. But I think the majority of them should have one. But you shouldn't just have one to have one, right? When you do go through this process, now it becomes setting up a plan. So what does that plan look like in terms of your tax deductions? How are you separating your income? Things that you're putting in place to make sure you maximize the opportunity. So the LLC is step one of an overall plan that you should be putting together to maximize this opportunity you have. Because most people don't have it.
Second question. My son's a freshman at an ACC school. He's earning some NIL money. What's the best way for him to track his NIL earnings and expenses so tax season is easier? So kind of following what you just said about putting a plan in place. Like what's the best way for, a 19-year-old, 20-year-old that's, money in, money out?
Yeah. So, and the reason I'm laughing is because we're right around tax time right now. And the amount of conversations that we have as a company with players that are saying, I owe $150,000 in taxes, but I think I did something last July and we could probably write that off, right? Can you go find that in my bank account? Like that is, and don't worry, it's everybody. So every player, every school, everybody's calling, everybody's trying to get in under the gun. But I think the best way to do it is put a structure in place. So what we do is we do this thing called a scan plan. Separate, calculate, automate, and navigate. And what that means is basically what we do is we calculate how much money you're going to owe from a tax perspective. So find out what that number is, right? You calculate it and then you automate this separation. So what that means is, so you get your money, how much you're going to owe, you figure that out and you separate, like put them apart. So NIL money goes in one bucket, your scholarship money, any money you may be getting from stipend, Alston, some schools still have Alston, some don't, right? Like all that money goes in one bucket, your NIL money goes in another bucket. And also your NIL expenses are going to come out of that bucket as well. So now if you do that and have it completely separate, when it comes tax time, it takes 2 seconds. You basically say, I made this, here's all my expenses. So I made $100,000, I have 80 grand in expenses, I have 20 grand, I got to pay taxes on, I'm done. So that is basically the simple way. So we always say, let's put a plan in place because most of these players know what they're going to make this year. So okay, I'm going to make 300 or 400 or 60 grand, whatever the number is, you know it. You can calculate your taxes, how much you're going to owe for taxes, and you just separate it, right? All right, now my money coming in for NIL, I'm taking tax out every single month that's set aside, so there's no surprises. And now I'm also tracking my expenses. So we do it, we have on our app that's really cool. We kind of automate it. So we have the players sign up for a scan plan. We automate it gets done for them. And then when it's tax time, a couple buttons, and then they get what's a quasi refund, right? Because they've been able to save and track stuff.
How would 20-year-old Mike Haddix at Siena done, let's say a $500,000 NIL deal? How would your scan plan work back then? You think you would have been on top of it, or would you have to be reeled in and figured out by your senior year?
So if I would have had a wonderful person like myself come in and shake me like I do with all these schools we go to and say, listen, like I get it, but like let's try to figure this thing out. So I think, I think we also have to remember like they're 19-year-olds who've never had money before, right? So like 500 grand, it's just like it's an opportunity. I got a credit card when I was in college and literally just spent it in like 2 weeks. I just didn't know how things work. So I think we have a lack of like financial education in this country, and because of that, it's like we sort of just we consume, and we don't take time to sort of think through the strategy there. So for me, I probably would have had to take a couple bumps on the head to be able to realize what to do. But so when I got done college, I moved to New York and then I went to business school. And I think back to business school loans or risk I could have taken a little earlier if I would have planned and saved and had a little bit of money in my pocket, right? So I took jobs I hated. I was miserable. So, it's like those things you do because you just need to get a check. So for me, I think if I would have, I can't say whether I would have like listened the first go round, but that's why Ask Out, we go multiple times. We go multiple times a year so they can hear me multiple times. But I think eventually when it got through, I would have been thinking about how this puts me in a position to do the things I want when I get out of school, to get the nicest apartment I want, to move to New York City, to have good credit, to be able to travel a little bit. All those things you want to do when most 21 and 22-year-olds can't do it because you get your first job and you're making less money than you thought. You're making ends meet. You got all these bills and it's just really, really hard. We can alleviate all of that stuff if we take this time today. So I think for me, I think it would have helped me, be able to take more risk and to be less stressed, right? We was able to make it through. But I think a lot of friends that I have now are still, and I'm 40, they're still stuck in jobs that I play ball with, are stuck in jobs in places they don't want to be because they can never get off the hamster wheel because they never got a break. So this is the break, right? If you get, this is a break for you to open up a window to go do the stuff you want. So for me, it's like, man, you got to take advantage of it. And everybody won't, they will not. But I can guarantee you the ones that do will look back in 5-10 years from now, and they'll be in a position they didn't assume they could ever get to. And they'll look at their teammates who were in that locker room with them, who heard the same things, who had the same opportunities, and they'll be looking like, man, like if only you would have listened, we could be on this private plane together or something like that, right? So that's the kind of the driving force about that sort of scam plan, because I think it's powerful today to protect you from the tax standpoint and make sure you have your taxes. But that thing is super powerful in 5 to 10 years.
It's funny when you talk about the locker room thing. I remember we were at LMU, who we work with, and Coach Lorenzo Romar, was talking, one, how much he loved what we did, and then he was talking about when he was playing for Milwaukee in the NBA, and Junior Bridgman would talk about all these things on the back of the bus of the plane about investments, and he's going to do this, and Romar would be like, man, it was way over my head. The late Junior Bridgman just passed away, but went on to become a billionaire just because, he figured out the game a little bit earlier, saw what he wanted to do, and just, was sharing that information with his peers. It was just like, hey, you ready to listen or not?
You ever see those movies, right? You'll be in college, the movies when they portray college, right? And like, look to the guy to your right, look to the girl to your left. Like, they're not going to be there tomorrow. Like, it's like one of those things, right? I tell the guys in the locker room, right? Like, look around here. Some in 5 or 10 or 15 years will be Magic Johnson. There'll be Andre Iguodala. There'll be Junior Bridgman, right? There'll be Elena Del Don. There'll be like super successful business people that are real estate owners and owning sports teams. They'll be doing some crazy stuff, right? There'll be some people.
Well, the only thing is some of those people are the walk-ons that the roster limits is going to impact. Some of these every place I've been, I've coached the walk-ons. Have been some of the most important players on the team. We can't get rid of those guys.
Yeah, 100%. Like, look at what's his name, the Rob Pelinka, right? Like, some of those guys.
Ishbia's we're at Michigan State. They own the Phoenix Suns.
100%. Yeah, there's an opportunity there, and I just I'm always like, man, these players have a chance to have a head start. So I'm super passionate about like where you want to be is right there. It's so close, right? Like when you're playing big time college sports, it's like the pro level is so close. But then you go on Instagram, right? Or you go on TikTok and you see private planes and you see like penthouses in South Beach. You see this stuff. I'm like, listen, like that stuff is really close too. If you start planning now, like that stuff is closer than you actually think it is if you take some time. So that's the big piece of this. I mean, that's why we do all this stuff. And I think, we're planting the seeds, so we'll see them start sprouting in a few years.
Last question, and, this is something we've dealt with, but somebody wrote in about, they're high profile, big time player. They've got their NIL, they've got their 1099, but they've also been given a vehicle. So how does that work? Like, how does that work with the vehicle, the 1099 separate from that? And like, how are they taxed? What do they need to know about an additional thing in supplement in addition to the money?
Yeah. So I would say like anything of value that you get through an NIL deal is taxable income, right? And I'll give you an example. So, and just a real world example, right? So I remember one year, my wife had won this trip with her job, and we went away. It was a great trip, and we're hanging out and on the beach and all this stuff. And at the end of the year, we get this our 1099s. I mean, 1099, excuse me, on our documents for the end of the year. I was like, wait a minute, like, how come we didn't make this money, right? And they charge you for it. Anything you get of monetary value is taxable income. The government is going to come and ask you to pay taxes on that, right? So for these players, and we have a real example that I'll share, anything you get, so if your collective is giving you a car, or they're giving you an apartment, or they're giving you something that's really valuable, that amount of money that it's worth is going right on that 1099. So we've had players that say, I made 80 grand last year. My 1099 says 180. How come it says that? Because I saved 40 because I thought I was doing the right thing, but I need like 100. And it's only because anything that they're giving you is taxable income. So I tell players, like, tell them to lease it for you, right? Tell them to lease it for you for $500 a month, right? So instead of having 100 grand, you got 6 grand in taxable income, right? So those are some of the things, but it's a wake up call, right? And as I mentioned before, like nothing is free. Anything you get costs money. So make sure you're prepared for it. And it might be a negotiating thing, right? Like, I'm going to give you a car. Actually, no, can you lease the car for me? Or, it's going to be a gift, right? Not taxable income. You got to figure out how to negotiate some of that stuff, right? To make sure you're protecting yourself. Or if you are going to take it, that's great. Make sure you understand that that's going to show up in your 1099. So those are, you get a box of hoodies that are, worth $10,000. That's like a $10,000 check. So those things do add up. So I think what we don't want to do is have players like not understand it, because most times you don't get it until later. And Uncle Sam is not going to say that, pleading ignorance works a lot of places. It don't work with the IRS. They don't care. Like, they want their money. So you better make sure you're prepared to have that conversation and you know what you're getting into. So, like, all money ain't good money. Every deal ain't a deal.
Wrapping up on that, Mike, tax day's coming up next week. Give me some takeaways. All right. Got some guys saying I've done my taxes. Got some guys saying I haven't done my taxes. What do they need to know before April 15th for any of those situations?
Yeah, I think, know where you stand. Don't rely on anybody else to give you this insight. Oh, I think they did it for me. My friend said he was doing my taxes, right? Don't rely on anybody else. You got to know, right? Because that tax piece, like, that will linger with you for a long time. So I'll say to that is, like, make sure you know where you stand. That's one piece. Two is, like, we all make mistakes, right? If it doesn't work out, if you forgot something, don't just, I forgot it, it's too late, I ain't worried about it, right? Like, ask somebody to help you clean it up, right? So take some time and say, okay, I missed a date, let me figure it out. If you make the right plan, you can always figure out how to make it work, right? Whether it's tax extensions, kind of all those pieces. So what I'd say is, know where you stand, ask questions, figure it out, get your stuff together, and ask for help, right? Go to your coach, right? Maybe your coach will call us, right? Go to somebody and say, hey, listen, I want to make sure I'm straight here. Because don't just forget about it, because it doesn't just go away because you don't see it. So I'd say make a plan. I think overall in the NIL game, it's just like, I think take your time on this stuff. Take your time, ask questions, take care of you, right? And listen, I get it. And I'm not saying, you got mom, dad, you got cousin, brother, everybody, but, like, the first person you got to take care of is yourself. I would say if you take care of yourself, you take care of everybody else. If you try to help everybody else first, guess what? You end up hurting everybody, them and you. So take care of you in this NIL game. Learn, ask questions, take care of you. And then if you do all that stuff, it'll work out for you. And keep the end in mind, right? The end is coming before you know it. So make sure you have your sights on that stuff.
And then just to really close the lid on that. So the extension part, is there a penalty? Give some people, because I've coached for a long time.
Yeah.
The day it's due is not the day it's going to be done. So we'll give them a little insight on the extension.
Insight on the tax stuff, right? So, like, April 15th is tax day, right? So you got two things you got to do. You got to file your taxes and pay your taxes on April 15th. So don't just do them and not pay them. You got to do both. And you can also get an extension for both. You can get an extension on filing and get an extension on paying. If you don't do either of those, the extension on filing is pretty hefty. Extension on paying is a little bit, but the extension on filing is hefty. So what I'd say is make sure you file your taxes. If you can't pay, work out a payment plan, kind of work through that stuff, but make sure you file them. But you can get extension on both, but do the paperwork. Don't wait till after the 15th, wait till before. So those are some of the things that I think are important. So make sure you're planning, and if you don't have the money, don't run and hide. Like, put a plan in place. So the 15th is tax day. So you got to pay them and file them on tax day.
Well, good stuff. I know you got the interview with Charlie Villanueva coming up. I think that's it for us for now. Subscribe, everybody. Leave a review. Tell us what you want to hear. At Invest with Scout on social media. We're everywhere. We'll be on college campuses every week for the next couple weeks. And Mike, anything else you want to leave them with before we get going?
No, so glad to have everybody here. Let us know who you want to hear on the podcast, any article that you see that's worth talking about, and who do you think, even college, that we should be talking to about their NIL journey. We're excited to have a great guest here, Charlie Villanueva. I'm going to give a little bit of intro for those that don't know Charlie. If they don't, I'd be very surprised, but we'll do a little bit of intro, kind of go over his background, and then we're going to open up some questions. So we're excited to have him here. So for those that don't know, today we have Charlie Villanueva on the podcast, NCAA National Championship, former NBA forward. Charlie played at UConn. He helped them win the 2004 NCAA Championship. He was selected number 7 overall in the 2005 NBA draft by the Raptors. Played 11 seasons in the league. Teams like the Raptors, the Bucks, the Pistons, and the Mavericks. And since retiring, opened up about tough times he had, whether that is with mental health during his playing days, dealing with injuries and even navigating his financial journey. So Charlie, thank you for coming today. We're happy to have you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate that intro, Mike.
Yeah, listen, I'm a college hooper, man, but I'm like, man, like it's very rarely do I have conversations with people that were better than me. So I
Uh,
tip my cap to that a little bit. But yeah, so the main goal of the conversation today is we just want to have real conversations about financial. We want to have real conversations about the financial journey that athletes go through. We're trying to make it normal to talk about this stuff, right? Charlie, you've been in NBA locker rooms, in college locker rooms. I've been in college locker rooms, right? Like we talk about everything in those locker rooms, but unfortunately, money is one of the things we never talk about. And I feel passionate about the fact that financial health is where mental health was 10 years ago, right? You think about when you were playing ball, right? We didn't talk about mental health; it wasn't a thing, and now it's commonplace. I think right now, if we don't get in front of sort of this financial journey, especially at the college level, right? How do we help these players navigate it? Because we don't want to see something tragic happen. So that's where we are. So I'm gonna kick it off with a couple of questions, if that works for you. So Charlie, the first question I have is: growing up in New York, what was your financial situation like, and how did you think about money growing up?
To be honest, I really didn't think about money as much. I mean, we come from Dominican backgrounds, Dominican immigrant parents who came to New York and trying to live the American dream, and so everything was a struggle. I mean, just to be transparent and straight up here, my parents grew up on welfare. I was on welfare for 18 years of my life, maybe a little bit more than that, to be honest. But yeah, so we managed with the little that we had, and I never really thought about like money as a thing or like I was missing it because I never really had it. So it was one of those things where financial literacy was not a thing, was not a topic discussed in the household, because we was just trying to worry about our next meal of the day. Those are different types of struggles there. So I definitely didn't come from a financial background and didn't know much about financial literacy at all. All that is, we grew up on welfare, and
So now let's fast forward, right? So kind of post growing up, you played 2 years at UConn, coming up on draft night, right? So all the money stuff is starting to hit you now. So think back to draft night. Were you thinking about that money and that opportunity as you walked across the stage?
that's a good question. I mean, like to be honest, I wasn't thinking about money at all. I was just thinking about the kid that had a dream of being in the NBA one day and shaking David Stern's hands is actually living up his dream. To me, I never looked at the NBA as a business. And maybe we can get into that a little bit later on. But I just looked at the me accomplishing a goal. I never thought about the financial aspect of it, and I wasn't prepared for any of it, to be honest. Because again, like I said earlier, like I didn't grow up in a financial, where financial literacy was talked about. So I didn't know any better. So I wasn't really thinking about the money aspect. I mean, I wasn't oblivious to it. Like I knew it was coming,
Yeah.
but like I'm not thinking like, okay, well, I'm going to end up doing this, that. I was just the same dude at all times.
So what was that wake up call, right? You talk about you didn't really think about the NBA as a business, but what was that wake up call, and then were other people around you thinking about that money maybe before you were?
Yeah, I mean, the number one people that count your pockets before you get it is your family. It's the people closest to you. And then for me, I was, fortunate enough to get drafted at 20 years old, but I'm still developing. I'm still young minded. I still need, people to look up to. And at that point, I didn't have nobody to look up to because remember, I grew up in the inner city of New York and Queens, and you know, people are in, economically are in a certain level. You know what I'm saying? So nobody's teaching me about all this money I'm about to get. So now I become the first of everything. The first millionaire in the family. Now I got to figure it out. Who am I going to get education from? And yeah, it just never happened. So I was kind of just learning on the fly.
So walk me through maybe one or two of those tough conversations, right? Like you talk about, right? Like people were counting your pockets, right? How'd you navigate that as somebody who was young, you're looking up to everybody, and then all of a sudden, people you look up to are asking for a couple dollars, right? How did you have those conversations?
That was tough. It was tough because I wasn't prepared for that, right? I'm looking at myself as this dude that just went to the NBA, but yeah, I'm still the same kid mentally. While other people all of a sudden now looking at me as dollar sign. So it was tough because you lose family members, you lose friends, people that you thought were friends because it's like I got drafted, but it's more like, oh no, we all got drafted type of deal, and it shouldn't be that way. But it was tough. It was tough. I remember having conversation with family members that where it was no, like they would ask me for X amount of dollars, and you have to learn how to say no. But I only learned how to say no because all the time I was saying yes. And anytime a family member or friend asks you for money, let me borrow, most of the time is let me get. You know what I'm saying? You're never seeing that money back. So once that happened a few times to me, I learned, so kind of like the experience, I kind of had to experience being let down. People say they're going to pay me back and they never do a few times. And then after that, after a few situations, it was like, all right, I got to learn how to say no.
You know, were there guys, in the locker room or people in your life that, were doing things financially that you wanted to do and that were your mentors when you got to the league or even as you kind of grew old in the league?
So, one thing I knew though, and I will give credit to the NBA on this is, they normally have these rookie transition programs or whatnot when you go into the league. And one of the things that stood out to me is that they said, and it always stood in my head, was 80% of athletes normally go broke after 5 years. This is in the NBA, after 5 years of retirement. And I've always said I want to be that 20%. I did a good job saving, all throughout my career in the NBA. But there was like the likes of the Magic Johnson, Shaquille O'Neal, a name a lot of people might not remember, but RIP just passed away, is Junior Bridgman, who was a guy that didn't make much in his NBA career, but after his NBA career, he's made, I think he was considered a billionaire. So looking at him as an entrepreneur, Magic Johnson, obviously, was an idol, at least for me, because of the entrepreneurship, business savvy that he has, and that's still one of my goals is to be like the likes of someone like him.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So let's go back to, you're drafted by the Raptors and you're heading to Toronto, right? Talk about your experience with taxes, right? Those Canadian taxes hit a little hard, right? So tell me about your tax experience. Listen, the young NIL guys, they're going through it right now, right? When they're making money and the tax Uncle Sam is coming for them. Like, what was your experience with that in Canada?
It's crazy because as I was 20, 21 years old, you're not really thinking about taxes because you never had to pay taxes,
Yeah.
right? So all I'm doing is counting on, and this is like the narrative needs to change, it needs to turn. Is as athletes, all we know is basketball, right? And then once we get to the opportunity where it becomes a business and we get money and we get paid for it, now it's like we got to depend on others. We got to depend on others to kind of show us the way, and that was kind of my case, and it shouldn't have been that way. They should have been teaching me as we're going along. But most of the times you see that, not to get too deep into it, but financial advisors and these professionals want to keep you in a certain box because the more they teach you or the more they educate you on certain things and how to do things, now you don't need them. So they kind of want to keep you in this box, and it shouldn't be that way. And that was one of those kids that fell into victim of that, of depending on others, whether it's taxes, how to buy a mortgage. I mean, how to buy a property, mortgage leverage. How do I leverage my assets? Credit lines, how to use them, this, that, third. I mean, I could go on and on and on. But I didn't learn all of this. I mean, it's the truth. I mean, I didn't learn it like towards the end of my career. Like, so when I get drafted by Toronto, I'm not thinking about taxes. I'm not thinking about I can write off certain things by buying certain things. I don't know how to do an LLC. So I'm not asking these questions because I just a lack of education. So now, fast forward later, now when it's time for me to go back to Toronto, and back in 2009, I had a chance to go to Toronto. Now I had a little bit of savviness to to consider that as a play. Like, I'm gonna be paying more taxes if I go to Canada.
Yeah.
So as I got older, I started getting a little bit more savvier on the financial side of things. But I was just a kid coming into the league, like that lacked education on my finances.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Like, we'll talk about Scout very briefly, but yeah, I think that's one piece you said, right? But most people that are making money off these players, they don't want you to understand how it works, right? Because if you know how it works, you know that I'm probably overpaying you for what you ain't doing.
Yeah.
So that's the whole thing. Is like, if I keep you in the dark, you'll need me forever. So, we try to change that. Now let's think back to like kind of the world we are in now, right? So if you were making NIL money when you were in UConn, would that have changed the way that you came out, you played there for a couple years, you were the number 7 pick, that contract was like 2 mil at the time? Like, how would NIL have affected your thought process there?
It would have. I think it would have helped me talk about my finance a lot earlier stage, right? And I think this I can talk about this all day too. Where in school they don't teach you these things. They don't teach you about how to open up an LLC and how to run a business and taxes and you know about real things that matter in life, right? That you're gonna face at some point in your life as you get older. But yeah, man, I mean, it was one of those things where it was hard for me to really understand finances in the beginning, and then I was able to, as I got older, able to figure things out.
Yeah, I love it. And one thing as part of this episode, I'm excited to announce is that you're an investor now in Scout, so you're a part of the team. We're excited to have you. If you can share kind of what was one of the deciding factors, or some of the factors that wanted that helped kind of push you to be a part of what we're building here at Scout.
I just love everything about it. I love the education aspect of it. The part that teaching you about your taxes, teaching you about opportunity, how to run certain things, how to I'm super big on education and the financial literacy side, so it stands with everything of what I represent. Because it's like we don't know the opportunity that these athletes hope, whatever sport they're playing, hopefully they play 20, 30 years in that sport. But 99.9%, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So how do you prepare these kids for life after whatever sport while they're earning this money? Because we don't know, some of these kids, this might be the most money they ever see in their life. So how do we make this money grow? How do we make this money work for us? Because the goal is to eventually figure out how money works for you versus you working for money. We all, nothing wrong with us being an employee, but there's not a lot of growth in that. You're not going to save yourself to wealth. You have to invest. You have to learn how to make this money grow. So yeah, why not teach it at an early age in college? So yeah, so me being a part of it, it was a no brainer for me.
I love it. I love it. So, we're happy to have you say that, NIL has created a bunch of business owners, right? You're paid as a 1099. All of a sudden, you're a business owner. So let's leverage that opportunity to kind of change your life and your family's life, but do it the right way. So we got a couple rapid fire questions. I'm going to ask you a couple questions. So give me a 1-word answer, kind of whatever you think, and then yeah, we'll wrap it. So I think the first thing is, what did you spend your first check on?
But I spent it on a BMW 750 Li. Bad decision.
Where's that? What happened to that car? How long did you have that car for?
I probably had it for 2 or 3 years and got rid of it, man.
Okay. All right. Well, that's longer than most, right? So we give you some credit there. Other than Scout, what's the best investment you've ever made?
In myself.
Okay.
Best investment I made is in myself, because at the end of the day, I betted on myself and things worked out for me. Life after sports, or life after basketball, I should say. I was considered one of the lucky ones where I was able to figure it out.
I love it. I love it. What's the, sorry to turn it to a sour note, what's the worst purchase you made other than that car?
Other than that car, probably I made some bad real estate decisions, bad investments that cost me a lot. But all you can do is you live, you learn, and you move on. And that's part of the game of being an investor, is you're going to win some and you're going to lose some. But the goal is to win more than you lose.
100%. 100%. What you say when that first NBA paycheck hit that account?
Damn. I'm out the hood.
I love it. I
I'm
love
out
it.
the hood. Yeah, for sure.
I feel you on that. And then what's the best NBA city to play in?
Best NBA city. I mean, I'm a New Yorker, so I'm gonna say New York. But I love my second would be Toronto.
Okay.
Yeah, so between New York and Toronto are two of my favorite cities to play in for sure.
And last question, right? You're in college today. What's the dream NIL deal that you want to have? With what company?
I would have been besides Scout.
Yeah, other than us, right? Other than us, but yeah, somebody else.
For me is since now that I make a living investing in real estate, I will somehow integrate some type of real estate company, having some type of deal with that. I felt like I study wealthy individuals, and any wealthy individual has real estate in their portfolio one way or another. So to me, it's like this the best partnership to have is with a real estate company, at least for me, for sure.
I love it. So that's all we have today, Charlie. Thanks for taking the time, man. This is great. Appreciate it. And again, our goal is how do we, demystify this financial thing and give players the tools earlier to change all their lives, right? And that's the whole goal of this and the whole goal of this conversation. So thanks for coming. We appreciate you coming.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me, Mike. Appreciate it.